Okay, here's a modern-day paradox for you. We live in a world that is more connected than it has ever been. I mean, we can talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, but the very tools we need to actually connect on a deeper level, yeah, students are giving up on learning them. It's a strange thing that's happening, right? It just doesn't quite add up. The more global our world gets, the less we seem to be preparing ourselves to actually live in it. So what's going on here? In a world that's practically screaming for connection, why are we learning fewer and fewer foreign languages? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we're going to dig into this really fantastic 2023 report from Denmark. And they did something that was frankly brilliant. They just skipped the politicians, they ignored the professors, and they went straight to the real experts on this, the students. We're talking nearly 1,000 of them, from elementary school all the way through high school. And their answers tell a very, very clear story. So here's what we're going to cover. First, the massive shadow that English casts over everything. Then, how students go from being curious to, well, just calculating. We'll also dive into the very real fear of speaking. And finally, what they're really choosing when they pick a language. All right, let's kick things off with the elephant in the room, the one thing that looms over this entire conversation. Let's talk about the shadow of English. So, what the report found is that students have this incredibly clear mental ranking system for languages. At the very top of the pyramid, you have English, but they don't see it as just another language. No, it's a need to have. It's the master key, the universal tool for the whole world. And then there's everything else. French, German, Spanish, they all get put in a different box. They're a nice to have, a cool extra skill for very specific situations, but not essential. And you can hear this logic loud and clear coming directly from the students. This one high schooler puts it so simply. English is the official language, so you can just more easily communicate with other countries. The perception is just crystal clear. Why would you bother learning another language when this one seems to solve every single problem? Now, this mindset doesn't just appear overnight. The report uncovers this really fascinating and, to be honest, kind of sad journey. It's a journey that starts with pure, wide-eyed curiosity and ends in cold, hard calculation. Just listen to how the motivation completely transforms over time. In third grade, it is pure excitement. I want to learn lots of languages because I game and it's cool. You can feel that spark, right? Then you jump to 8th grade, and practicality starts to creep in. German is useful. There are many good jobs where you speak German. Okay, makes sense. But then you get to high school, and the passion is just gone. It's all strategy. I chose German because it's only 2 years. Spanish is 3, and I need to raise my math grade. Wow. The language itself is almost an afterthought. It's just about gaming the system for a better GPA. But it's not just about cold calculation and schedules. The report also digs into a really powerful emotional barrier, something happening right inside the classroom, and that is a deep, deep fear of speaking. The researchers actually give this a name, doubled utsadet, which translates to double jeopardy. And think about it, it makes perfect sense. In math class, you're scared of getting the answer wrong. That's one fear. But in language class, you're hit with a double whammy. You've got the fear of being wrong about what you say, the actual content, and you've got the fear of being wrong about how you say it, the grammar, the pronunciation, all of it. It's a totally unique kind of pressure. And that pressure is made so much worse by this huge disconnect. Students want one thing, overwhelmingly, practical conversation. They just want to be able to talk to people. But what do they get in the classroom? A heavy, heavy focus on memorizing grammatical rules. The whole system prioritizes being perfectly accurate over being confidently fluent. And that creates an environment where the fear of making one single mistake can shut down the desire to communicate at all. And you can just hear the frustration in their voices. This student nailed it. It's not like I'm going to talk to a German about their history. I'd much rather just have a conversation. For them, the goal is connection, not becoming an academic expert. And when the class feels totally irrelevant to that goal, it's not just boring. It becomes intimidating. So when you start putting all these pieces together, the giant shadow of English, that shift from curiosity to calculation, and the fear brewing in the classroom, it becomes really clear that when a student chooses a language, it's not a simple choice. they're navigating some pretty powerful barriers. It really boils down to three big things, all working against language learning. First, the dominance of English just makes other languages feel, well, redundant. Second, that fear of making mistakes, which is driven by all those grammar-heavy classes, it just kills the desire to even try. And finally, the educational system itself, with its rigid schedules and requirements, turns a choice that should be about passion into a cold, strategic calculation about workload. But it's not all bad news, because even inside this really challenging system, some students still get it. They see a deeper truth. Just listen to this one student. I feel that English can be an intermediary thing, but speaking their language can make it a bit more personal. That's it. That's the whole point right there. English is the go-between, the intermediary, but their language, that's personal. And that leaves us with this final, really crucial question. This report shows that students are being trained to see language as a tool for transactions, with English being the ultimate power tool. And it's practical, it's efficient. But if that's all we prioritize, what happens to connection? If one language is for the transaction, what do we lose when we can't use another one for the connection? What understanding, what human bonds, what part of our shared humanity are we giving up when we can only transact, but we can no longer truly connect?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into something most of us have tried and maybe, just maybe, failed at: learning a new language. And it turns out, a lot of what we think we know about it might be completely wrong.
So let's just start with a kind of provocative question. We're always told that learning a language is this amazing, life-changing journey, but should you even bother? Is it actually worth it?
You know, the polyglot Luca Lambriello really put it perfectly. He said, sure, there are a million reasons to pick up a new language, but, and this is the key, not all of those reasons are actually helpful. In fact, picking the wrong one can basically guarantee you'll fail before you even start.
And that leads us straight into our first big idea today, what I'm calling the motivation trap. See, we're often sold this dream about language learning, with a bunch of promises that just don't really hold up. Okay, so here's the big one, the number one expectation: I'll get a better job. But the reality can be a little harsh. The truth is, if you don't already have a skill that's valuable in the job market, learning another language just means you won't have that skill in two languages. A language is almost always a force multiplier for an existing skill. It's rarely a brand new skill all on its own.
So, what are these other weak motivators? Oh, you'll probably recognize these. Doing it just to slap another line on your resume. Or because someone told you it's a healthy habit, like it's the same as going to the gym. Or, and this is a big one, because an ad promised you'd be fluent fast. And of course, the classic, you just want to impress people at a party. These are all, frankly, terrible foundations for such a long and difficult journey.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Being bilingual isn't a personality upgrade. It's not going to magically turn you into a more charming or interesting person. It's a skill, a tool for communication. That's it. You're still going to be you. You'll just have a bigger vocabulary.
All right, so this moves us from our own personal reasons to the place where most of us first tried to learn a language, school. And for so many people, this is where the trouble really starts. There's just this huge, massive gap between what we learn in a classroom and what it actually takes to communicate.
Check this out. A really interesting study of Danish students found this wild difference in how they felt about languages. English, they saw it as a life skill, something they needed. It made them feel confident. But German and French, totally different story. They were just another school subject, one that made them feel insecure and bogged down by endless grammar drills.
And that feeling of insecurity, wow, it's captured perfectly by what the student said. The fear of saying something wrong, of being made fun of, it just makes you anxious. And that fear-based learning is the absolute enemy of progress. I mean, how can you learn to speak if you're terrified of opening your mouth?
So you end up with this fundamental disconnect. The official goal is what they call communicative competence, the ability to, communicate. But what students actually experience is this obsessive focus on grammatical accuracy. And that constant fear of being wrong, it just completely smothers fluency. The classroom accidentally teaches you to be silent instead of to speak.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Or maybe we should call it the English elephant, because you can't talk about learning other languages today without talking about the overwhelming dominance of English. It changes everything. Just look at these numbers from Denmark to see how huge this shift is. Back in 1995, only 4% of Danes spoke English on a daily basis. By 2022, that number had exploded to 24%. That's almost a quarter of the population. English isn't just a foreign language over there anymore, it's a part of daily life.
Researchers in Denmark have this brilliant term for it, the goge-onge effect. It means the cuckoo effect. And it's such a perfect image, right? Just like a baby cuckoo pushes the other eggs out of the nest, the massive presence of English is crowding out other foreign languages in schools, in culture, everywhere.
So, with all of these challenges, what does it really take to succeed? Well, it's time for some brutal honesty. Let's look at the unglamorous reality of it all. The real price of entry to get genuinely good at a language.
Yeah, the road to fluency doesn't look like an Instagram reel. It's not glamorous. It's spending hours with a grammar book by yourself. It's having really stilted, awkward, sometimes painful conversations. It's making a ton of uncomfortable mistakes, feeling foolish, and then doing it again. And, this is a big one, it's sacrificing time you used to spend doing other things you enjoy.
And that sacrifice is so real. This comment from a Reddit user says it all. This person was a huge reader, but they basically gave it up to get good at German. Then, when they started Russian, they had to stop gaming completely. Learning a language isn't something you just add on top of your life. It often requires you to take something else away. Okay, I know that all sounded pretty intense, but I promise this isn't meant to discourage you. It's about being realistic. Because once you understand the reality, you can find a much better, much more sustainable way to learn. And it all boils down to one thing: finding your real why. And that means we have to completely reframe what the goal is. Success isn't about learning a cool party trick. It's not about some external reward. It comes from making a long-term, deeply personal commitment. It has to come from within. So what does this healthier mindset look like in practice? It means you're learning because you genuinely love the process, even the frustrating parts. It means you're connecting with a culture that you truly care about. You have to accept that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You have to prioritize communicating over being perfect. And finally, you have to build a safe space for yourself, a world where it is absolutely 100% okay to fail. And that brings us right back to the beginning, but with a whole new lens. After all this, after debunking the myths, after facing the hard truth of the journey, what is your reason? Is it strong enough? Is it personal enough? Is it meaningful enough to carry you through it all? Because that right there is the only question that truly matters.
Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so today we're diving into something really interesting happening in Denmark. You know, the country has this reputation for speaking incredible English, right? But what's the cost? What's happening to all the other foreign languages? And really, this quote from a Danish high school student kind of sums it all up. She said, "It's rare to meet someone who says, 'Oh, I just love German. I just have to take French.'" And you know what? That feeling isn't just a one-off comment. It really points to this huge shift in how young Danes think about language. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. So, what is actually going on here? Well, what we're seeing is this English takeover, and it's creating this strange paradox. Experts are calling Denmark a nation of monolingual polyglots. I know, that sounds totally impossible, right? But think about it. It means people are fluent in their native Danish and, of course, English, but that's it. They're increasingly just stopping right there, dropping that third or fourth language. And to really get this, you gotta look at the numbers, specifically the choices students make when they hit high school or stux in Denmark. Get this, a massive 85% of students take German in primary school. But the second they get a choice, boom, only 55% decide to stick with it. Instead, you've got over a quarter of them, 27%, jumping ship to start Spanish from zero. And French is kind of just struggling to hang on. That is a huge drop for a language they've already put years into. You know, this whole thing has a name. experts came up with this really powerful metaphor for it, Gogi-Unge-effekten, which translates to the cuckoo chick effect. And it's a perfect image, right? Just picture the Danish education system as a little bird's nest. English has gotten so big and so dominant, it's basically acting like a cuckoo chick, and it's just pushing all the other languages, German, French, you name it, right out of the nest. Okay, so that brings us to the big question, why? Why is English the default? What makes it feel like the quote-unquote easy choice for so many students? Well, the answer isn't just about how useful it is. It's really all about perception. When you talk to Danish students, you see there are these two totally different ways of thinking. On one hand, you have English. For them, it's not even a foreign language anymore. It's just life. It's what you need. It's everywhere. Gaming, movies, the internet. A lot of them feel like, hey, I already know it. But then you have German or French. And what are they? Oh, they're just a school subject, a requirement. Something that's hard to learn and, I'll probably never even use it anyway. The contrast is stark, and this influence of English, it runs so deep, it's actually changing how some young Danes feel about their own language. Like this one university student, Casper, who's 28, he said, I also think some expressions in Danish sound cringe. I mean, wow. When your own native language starts to feel cringe, that's when you know English isn't just a tool anymore. It's become this fundamental part of who you are, part of your identity. But look, this isn't a one-sided story. It's not just about the magnetic pull of English. There's also a really powerful push away from the other languages. And that push, it starts right in the classroom. Yeah, when you ask students about their German or French classes, you hear the same thing over and over. This one student said it perfectly. We do pretty much nothing but grammar. And that's the killer, right? This relentless focus on rules with no real connection to just talking to people. It just makes the whole thing feel so dry, so abstract, and completely removed from the actual goal, which is to, speak the language. And it gets worse. Because that grammar-heavy classroom often creates this deep-seated fear of messing up. Another student told us, if you said something wrong in there, you were made fun of. Can you imagine? That just creates this super high-stakes, zero-trust feeling where kids are just too scared to even try. It completely kills the confidence you need to just play with the language and learn. So you put years into this kind of environment, and what's the result? Burnout. Pure frustration. You can just hear the exhaustion in the student's voice. You've had German since 5th grade and you still don't speak it fluently. It just seems a bit overwhelming. That feeling that all those years of work didn't give you any real-world skill, it makes a lot of students just throw their hands up and say, I'm done. Okay, so let's recap. You've got the constant pull of English on one side, and on the other, this big push away from other languages because of frustrating classrooms. So what happens? Well, students stop making choices based on passion and start making them based on points. They get strategic, and you can see the strategic thinking plain as day when you look at their choices. For a lot of them, it's not about what they're interested in, it's about finding the path of least resistance. So continuing German becomes the get it over with quickly option. It's only a 2-year commitment, it's a B-level course, done. But starting Spanish or French from scratch, whoa, that's a 3-year A-level course. That's a huge commitment. And it's seen as something only for the people who are really, really interested. And really, it all comes down to a very simple truth about how we learn. This one student just nailed it. They said, you learn more if you enjoy it and like it, and not if you're driven by your fear. And that's it, right there. When the whole system is set up to make you choose based on fear, or just what's easiest, instead of what you're curious about, you break the very engine of what makes learning work. So this isn't just about what happens in school. This trend has consequences that ripple out way, way beyond the classroom. So what does Denmark as a whole country actually stand to lose from this big pivot to English? Let's talk about the future cost. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. So what? Who cares? We've got Google Translate now, right? And yeah, technology is an incredible tool, but the experts are warning that thinking it can just completely replace language skills, well, that's a really short-sighted and maybe even dangerous way to look at it. And those costs, they're very real. I mean, think about it. If your students learn these languages, who's going to teach them in the next generation? you're looking at a serious teacher shortage. Then there are the missed economic opportunities with huge trading partners like Germany. And maybe the biggest cost of all, you could have an entire generation that can only see the world through English language media and sources. That's a huge, profound narrowing of your entire country's perspective. Hannah Kjærgaard from the National Center for Foreign Languages really gets to the heart of the risk here. She warns that if we only rely on English, quote, then we also get an Anglophone value set and cultural image. In other words, the real danger is that Denmark could lose its ability to understand its neighbors, to understand the world on their own terms. Instead, you'd be seeing everything through one single, dominant cultural filter. So here's where we land. Denmark's skill in English is a huge strength. Nobody is arguing with that. But the country really is at a crossroads. As it leans into this one language more and more, you have to ask, what parts of its connection to the rest of the world, and maybe even to itself, is it leaving behind?